The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia, and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much.
Welcome to AI for Good, the leading action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by ITU, in partnership with 40 UN sister organizations, and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. In today's session, we're counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished panelists and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to you online all around the world and to our esteemed and distinguished panelists. I am David Manset from ITU. I am today moderating this webinar on open source artificial intelligence for public services. I am glad to open this highly expected webinar on this particularly interesting topic, especially as we have witnessed the registration of more than 300 participants. Our objective today is to discuss the benefits and the challenges of using open source artificial intelligence technologies in developing new digital public services. I will share my screen just to accompany the talks. All right. So, indeed, we can see everyday breakthrough news and developments around AI that tell us how important this is becoming for our whole society. Given the powerful outcomes of these AIs, it is surpriseless and but also limitless to imagine the potential impact of such developments in all our society, including the public sector. We therefore see more applications taking birth in public administration, ranging from tasks automation to more advanced chatbots for citizens, but also to decision support tools to improve public policies, some of which we will discuss today with our distinguished panelists. But let me first introduce our panelists before getting into that discussion. So today we'll have Senator Alejandra Lajunes from the Republic of Mexico that will tell us about her active role in promoting, regulating, and raising awareness in AI for public services. She will then be followed by Daniel Brumund, AI advisor from JIZ, more specifically talking about chatbots developments in the world, in Africa. By the way, I would like to really warmly thank Daniel, who took over Leah Gimpel, who unfortunately for personal reasons could not attend. We are super happy and excited to hear from Daniel's developments. I will then give the floor to Ott Versberg, Chief Data Officer from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications from the Republic of Estonia. Ott will talk about a very interesting chatbot development that is taking place nowadays in Estonia, the Bureaucrat project. So we hope to learn from these developments some key lessons and quick wins for others. Last but not least, I will give the floor to Jovan Kobalija, Founding Director of the Diplo Foundation and head of the Geneva Internet Platform, who will talk about education, skills, capacity building toward the sustainability and, more importantly, the digital sovereignty of governments. So without making you wait more, let me welcome Senator Lajunes to enlighten us on her ongoing initiative and to elaborate how she raises awareness, regulates and take best advantages from AI in public services, such as with the ANA Alliance. So Alejandra, could you tell us more about this initiative and about the key messages that you convey with this alliance?
Thank you very much, David. Good morning from Mexico City. And thank you really very much to ITU, to the AI for Good and Open Source initiative for the invitation to this panel. Thanks, David, for moderating. And it's really a pleasure to share this panel with Daniel, Ott, and Jovan. So I think one of the key challenges now with this topic with artificial intelligence is governance. So thank you for letting me share what's happening in Mexico in terms of how are we working from the different sectors and how the governance model is really making a difference in this country. So the National Intelligence Alliance, ANIA, by its acronym in Spanish, it's a multi-stakeholder initiative that includes industry leaders, governments, academic institutions, regulators, international organizations, civil society organizations, technology entrepreneurs, and startups. Its core mission is to enhance Mexico's AI ecosystem and encourage a comprehensive dialogue on AI with a multidisciplinary approach. ANIA was launched almost 1 year ago, 10 months ago on April 2023 as a bicameral initiative with the Chamber of Deputies. It's very important this because working the Senate with the Chamber of Deputies, it's a significant backing from both the Congress. And this support is crucial in a context like Mexico and broadly in the Global South, where multiple legislative initiatives on trending topics like artificial intelligence often undergo lengthy discussions and analysis before potentially evolving into national regulatory frameworks. Through the Alliance, through ANIA, we have achieved already tangible results, tangible actions in our regulatory process. First, we already presented a bill to reform the Constitution, specifically Article 73. This bill would allow Congress to legislate in matters of artificial intelligence, neural rights, and cybersecurity. It was endorsed by all political parties, and this proves that this model of governance works and that this is a priority also for the Senate. This bill marks a significant advancement in the digital and technological era in Mexico, empowering the Congress to legislate on these three very important matters in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and neural rights. The second one is that we are collaborating with the UK Prosperity Fund on the feasibility studies to implement a regulatory sandbox in Mexico. This sandbox is a controlled environment for testing regulatory frameworks or emergent technologies or public policy developments. This is overseen by regulatory authorities, and we think this is the most responsible way to innovate and regulate in AI and other emerging technologies. The presentation of this project will be presented in March the 5th. And lastly, we are preparing a policy paper with recommendations on policy regulation and governance to the presidential candidates in the coming months. Mexico is undergoing this year the biggest elections in history, including we are voting for president. So this is a very important moment in Mexico, and this initiative, the alliance, is key in this process, because this policy paper that we are preparing in the alliance is very important, since in Mexico, Article 6 in the Constitution mandates the executive branch of the government to develop a national digital inclusion strategy as part of the national development plan each presidential period. So we aim for that these recommendations of the policy paper to be a very valuable input for the incoming digital agenda 2024-2030, which will also be the deadline to accomplish the Sustainable Development Goals. So the ANIA, the Alliance, focuses in 4 main initiatives. One is understanding the current state of AI in Mexico. The National Intelligence Alliance has established expert working groups in 6 main themes: human rights and public policy, education and labor markets, cybersecurity and risk management, gender inclusion and social responsibility, infrastructure and data, and innovation and industry. ANIA is also collaborating with UNESCO. UNESCO is working with us in these working groups, using the readiness assessment methodology to align the results of this working group with the global AI ethics recommendations. Further, we have created specialized subgroups that are working on neuro rights, cybersecurity, data, regulatory sandbox approaches, and labor and market issues. And a very, well, the legislative achievement is a constitutional bill presented already, as I already told you, and we are working on the next steps in the regulatory framework. So these efforts represent Mexico's commitment to ethical AI development that upholds social welfare and respect for civil rights. The second line of action that we're working on is generating awareness, understanding, and skills related to AI in the general population. In Mexico, 99% of the population doesn't understand what's in it for them in AI. So the Alliance is committed to enhancing the general AI knowledge and working on the upskilling or reskilling of the general population. And this includes educational courses on AI topics tailored to different groups, such as teachers, students, women, small and medium businesses, and entrepreneurs. We have had more than 1,500 people have already taken courses in a very short period of time. This shows really a big interest on learning about AI. So the third line of action is documenting case studies in Mexico, how governments are using AI and how businesses in Mexico, primarily small and medium businesses in Mexico, are using AI. So in this line of action, we are working with organizations like CAF and local governments to document AI usage in Mexican sectors. This initiative, we believe it's vital for understanding really in Mexico how is different sectors using AI and how can we applicate regulatory needs within Mexico unique context. The fourth line of action is facilitating international collaboration on AI-related matters. We recognize the global nature of AI, so ANIA emphasizes international partnerships and collaborations, and this approach aims to align Mexico's AI development with global technological and economical shifts, but we want to position Mexico and Latin America as a significant player in the global AI arena. So the alliance, as you see, it's a pivotal initiative. It's a pioneering and a new governance model, integrating national and international technology leaders and regulators. And from here, from the ANIA, we, the legislators, are learning and are co-working to develop a really responsible regulatory model through a regulatory sandbox, this control space for testing regulation before making the regulation, testing technologies before they go out to the society, and testing public policy development, ensuring AI is used responsibly and ethically. And ANIA is undergoing, just as we are talking, we are evaluating we have more than 30 bills in the Senate and in the Chamber of Deputies presented already, but we, with the Alliance, are undergoing the analysis of these different bills before they are voted. So the ANIA is really a very, we are changing the paradigm on how to make laws. This is a very novel model of governance, and we are focusing on the main topics in the Mexican reality. And thank you for letting me share what we are doing in the Alliance.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. It's very interesting to hear about these developments in Mexico, and in particular, the efforts you're putting into digital governance, which I believe are of primary importance as technology is moving forward so quickly. Especially we can see in various places in the world that things are advancing in terms of regulations. We recently heard about the White House bill. There was the G7 statement, but also the European Union AI Act, which has been, I think, one of the first regulations to take birth with a risk-based approach to framing how AI can be used in the future. So thank you very much for having given this state of affairs, state of the art in Mexico. I would like to now give the floor to Daniel Brumond from GIZ. Daniel, yes, I can see you. Daniel, so could you give us an overview of what you are doing with your partners in Africa on creating open source language technology, and especially in projects such as the Kenyan government chatbots? Because as Alejandra said, AI is quite complex. Not all of us understand it, and there are various use cases, various types of technologies. I didn't show one slide that I wanted to, but I can do at the end, which kinds of summarizes the state of the art in terms of open source technologies and ongoing projects worldwide. But it's very, very confusing because there are so many. So could you give us, by example, some of your learnings from your works ongoing with the Kenyan government, and in particular the potential that this open source AI brings in and the associated challenges?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, David. And also from me, a good morning, good afternoon, and also good evening for everyone listening in. Very interesting presentation, Alejandra, by you just now. And I was very grateful to be, it's privileged to be part of this webinar where you're bringing in so many different perspectives, also from Jovan and Ott following after me. many different perspectives of how we can go about open source AI for public service delivery responsibly. And thank you to ITU, of course, for organizing this webinar. And I'm also extending my greetings from Leah Gimpel from the Digital Public Goods Alliance, who unfortunately can't be here because of an urgent private matter that has come up. I work for GIZ, more specifically for the Fair Forward Artificial Intelligence for All project. It's a project implemented by GIZ on behalf of our Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And what we do, what our mandate is, very generally, is to work with partners from government, civil society, and academia in Africa and Asia towards more open, inclusive, and sustainable AI. And more specifically, what I'll be talking to now on this I'll talk now on my presentation is about work we do with government partners who look specifically at investing into AI technology to improve public service delivery. And as to Forward, but also many of our partners at the international level, such as, for example, the Mozilla Foundation, we believe that there's value in doing this as openly and as inclusively as possible. And from a very sort of technical, hands-on perspective, very early question normally is, why should we do this the open source way? Why don't we just buy some off-the-shelf commercial product? Why don't we just go use ChatGPT, create some sort of fine-tuned GPT model for our case? You can do that, of course, but there's at least two big caveats that I would see in that, also based on our experience. One is that, I'll be talking about language technology models, AI models, existing AI models in language technology, whether it's automated speech recognition or others, do not perform well in so-called under-resourced languages. What under-resourced languages mean is those languages that are currently not well represented in the let's call it the digital space. So if you look at the internet, I don't have the exact percentage, but some 70–80% of the internet are English. So there's very little text data for many languages of the so-called global south or majority world. And there's even less data available when it comes to audio data that you would need to build speech recognition models. And even if those models did exist, then, if you as a public agency, public entity want to use AI, for example, in a chatbot, you need to ask yourself, do you want this core digital infrastructure, AI-based, that can help facilitate government to citizen communication interaction? Do you want that infrastructure to be dependent on tech companies that are either not transparent about the underlying data sets, for instance, that can change their terms and conditions literally overnight? Those are risks, right? And these risks create instability, or can create instability, and they can also risk losing trust with citizens. And then, when you look at it from this angle, that quickly leads to the benefits of open source systems, or more specifically, open source AI, which enables transparency by being able to inspect the open source system. And those of you who've maybe been following the discussion or the discourse around open source AI would know that it's a little bit more tricky when it comes to AI, what open source means. And maybe in the Q&A, we can go into that if you're interested. But being able to inspect an AI system, the model, the data, enables transparency, creates trust, and going the open source way also creates stability. Because say you're using this one provider, they go bankrupt or something happens, if that system, if the speech recognition model you're using is open source, you can use it with another provider, or you can utilize it yourself. I just wanted to make one thing clear, and because if you're listening to me, it may come across as if I'm saying one shouldn't work with the private sector in this regard, and I'm not saying that at all. On the contrary, I think it's very important. I think public sector can have a role in investing in digital infrastructures and has an important role. Private sector has a role to develop then AI technologies, and I think it's actually one of the biggest misunderstandings of open source. That also extends to open source AI, to think, A, that it's free, and B, that you can't make money with it. And that's wrong. Every one of us who has, for example, Android phone, Android is open source, and companies make a lot of money with it, just as one example. And to give you a concrete example from our work now, we as Fair Forward, we work in several partner countries in Africa, Kenya being one of them, and there we work with government agencies that are employing chatbots for improving access to public services. One first example there was work with the Business Registration Service, or BRS, that wish to develop a chatbot that helps citizens find information registering businesses, find information about licensing, tax information, and so on. And through promoting this chatbot, then the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, or ODPC, in Kenya then also showed interest in creating a chatbot that makes information about the Data Protection Act in Kenya actually more accessible, more understandable, informs citizens about their rights, and also answers questions in that regard. And what's interesting is that both chatbots were built in partnership with a local tech company called Think, that is providing the tech expertise. Initially, it also involved collaboration with an international organization called Clear Global that supported Think with some of the tech, more sort of advanced tech aspects when it comes to chatbot and AI development. And why I'm mentioning these two projects, I think there's at least three aspects that are interesting when we speak of open source AI and using that for public service delivery. One being that those projects were steered and led by Kenyan partners and tech companies, with, of course, a bit of initial skills training from an international organization, but that helped build a local ecosystem also for building AI systems locally, and also investing in open resources and data sets that can then also be used by others. Second aspect would be that these projects involved hands-on involvement from public officials, from the respective agencies, BRS and ODPC that I mentioned, as well as their respective IT teams, and I mentioned that again just now. And then the third aspect is that these projects are built as open source applications. So both the software, the tech stack, also the text data sets for the models are open, which means that it'll make it easier for other entities to build similar chatbots. And with this experience, actually, we are currently working together with a sister project of ours, the GovStack team. Some of you may have heard of GovStack, on another chatbot, also in Kenya. Those of you who do not know GovStack, GovStack is an initiative that the main aim of GovStack is to create open source tech that helps public sector entities with digitizing their public services through what they call interoperable building blocks that can be reused. And the aim of this chatbot project that we are kicking off soon will be to build a chatbot that helps citizens find government services in Kenya to address whatever issue that they are facing. And Kenya has I think a few hundreds or thousands even services that are digitized, but they're a little bit hard to find. And the chatbot is supposed to help with that. And then at the same time, we want to use this to create a chatbot stack as an open source building block that can then also be easily reused by other agencies, be it in Kenya, but also internationally. And yeah, if you're interested in details, we can maybe use the Q&A, or you can always drop an email. Now, one of the questions that we wanted to look at in the webinar more generally was, what's needed for responsible AI use, responsible open source AI use, and deployment by the public sector. And I think I'm looking a bit at the time, there's 5 aspects that maybe from our work we found as crucial working experience in terms of experiences that we had working with our Kenyan partners. First being political buy-in. That's needed from the start, and what's also needed is a dedicated team from the respective public agency, including staff who can speak to the content. For example, a particular law, such as the Data Protection Act that I mentioned, and also the tech team that will then end up integrating the chatbot, in our case, into the government entity website. Second aspect is awareness of AI potentials and risk, also open source AI potentials and risks. So what AI systems actually are good at, what can they do well, looking basically knowledge management or making knowledge accessible. That's what they're very good at, but where do they falter? Where can they also exacerbate harms? The third aspect would be coming to the open source point, a transparent and open tech stack. I would always say to encourage public entities to invest in open technology, ensure transparency of AI models and data sets. There are great resources for how to document, for example, AI training data sets, for documenting AI models by researchers such as Tim Gebru. Of course, looking at the open source AI sort of discourse at the moment, there's a question whether data sets always need to be fully opened. In some instances, that can be risky if it's very highly sensitive data. But again, there's ways to document data sets in a way that allows users to really understand the data provenance. So where the data came from, how it was collected, what are the sources, and so on and so on. but then also looking at assessments of responsible use of data. This is another activity that we're working on elsewhere to really look at aspects where AI would potentially increase bias and then look at mitigation measures. Fourth aspect would be to build and test AI systems as inclusively as possible. So, I mean, we all know, you should build, take always with the user, for example, in the ministry. But then I would also say with people, citizens, for example, who might be affected by the system. Because if you do it open source and if you include citizen participation early on, this all can go a really long way to better anticipate and also mitigate real world harms by using AI. And then lastly, fifth point would be to invest in local AI ecosystems. So also encouraging, public entities to find local talent, build local talent when it comes to AI. And I hear, Alejandra, what you mentioned, in Mexico, that is one of your core points, and I also see that as really crucial. And to also invest in, I would say, encourage public entities to invest in AI systems as digital public goods. In our case, now with the chatbots, for example, the underlying data sets, both text but also speech data sets in key Swahili. Yeah, and then maybe to close, I would just say that from the experience that we've gathered, we would strongly encourage every public agency and government entity wishing to use AI to do so in an open source way. We have this motto, public money, public code. Also apply this to AI in a responsible way. And then very personally, I would add to encourage not to aim for the next unicorns, but rather to consider investing in smaller initiatives that are open, that are connected, and that can thereby create a very different pathway to impact via open source deployment and sharing of AI systems for public benefit.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for this very insightful feedback. Indeed, I noted a couple of points that are really of interest. One being local ecosystems, indeed, by having political buy-in and making sure that local resources are involved into those developments, help building capacity. So it was very interesting to hear about your developments and the lessons learned, especially to gear toward responsible developments. Thank you very much. I just wanted to add one thing, as you mentioned briefly, that it's to date not formally defined what is open source artificial intelligence. There are interesting ongoing works at the Digital Public Goods Alliance, DPGA, which is since a couple of months now, which has been working on such a definition as an extension to the open source definition. So indeed, that's an important point. I would like to now give the floor to Ott Versberg, the Chief Data Officer from the Republic of Estonia, to talk about his experience as part of the well-known to date bureaucrat project. So, Ott, could you tell us more about this bureaucrat chatbot to citizens that is under development, and from your experience, what were or have been the main issues that you faced with using open source technologies in the field? And could you elaborate on how you pragmatically faced them?
Thank you. So hi, everyone. So first of all, what is bureaucrat? So I assume most people are not familiar. Bureaucrat is our vision of how the government should operate in the age of AI. So more specifically, bureaucrat is our version of Siri or Alexa, but it provides citizens possibility to communicate with the government using any possible channel, any possible device, a completely device and channel agnostic way. Also personalized services. So not just information, but rather if a person wants to renew their driver's license, they should be able to do that through the means that is most comfortable and suitable for the task at hand. So bureaucrat is not one single chatbot, it's rather an interoperable network of different AI assistants. So in Estonia, we unfortunately don't have really huge or any major AI companies within the technology industry. However, we decided to take a really open approach. So this is one of the reasons we are talking about the open source. So we have invested a lot of resources over the years in language technology development and other core components, similarly to open data. So our objective and approach has been that due to our size, Estonia is a small market. We are oftentimes overlooked by larger companies, but we can adapt open source solutions, but also open data approach similar as well. So if we, from a government perspective, invest in a technology or data itself, everyone would benefit from that. So talking about the project itself, what we are doing is open as well. So all the source codes, all the development, it's accessible to everyone. There are no private or private repos, no hidden tasks. So transparency is a key aspect. So going to the practical side, we've been looking into both from the framework itself that we've been using, Rasa, different language technology components, libraries. And to be honest, there are a lot of different obstacles that most are going to face when taking the open source approach. It has its benefits, but every approach has its own cons as well. So when we think in terms of the language itself and the LLMs, then this is an issue very common for smaller languages. Europe itself is, from a language perspective, extremely diverse. In Estonia, we have close to 1 million people. So having the support from today's LLMs for Estonian is limited. So there is a lot of resources that we need to invest ourselves, that the solutions that do exist and those that can be used are actually sufficient to be used from a business perspective. Even if you take, for instance, OpenAI, GPT, different versions, they are not functioning extremely well for Estonian. So there's a lot of effort that goes into fine-tuning and actually collecting the necessary data. And we are right now working to test out existing open source models and develop or extend our own. So there's a lot of effort that we need to put into. So this is definitely from one side. When we go to the different open source solutions itself, there is oftentimes a kind of level of complexity that comes with using and implementing. We have seen that the documentation is not really there. The licensing terms, they are sometimes, unfortunately, limited. There is a growing approach to having a free tier and kind of a more premium solution on the side, which unfortunately, so just to reflect back maybe on the Rasa side, what happens with the community? What happens with the support? So if you are using the open source version of a tool such as Rasa X, the licensing and the limitations, it can really affect how you are actually operating. So you need to keep in mind that you are not really relying on one solution itself. Also, control over the solutions themselves. We started Bureaucrat already close to 3 years ago. So imagine today dialogue processing. Some of the frameworks that we've been using, they are still operating in kind of pre-GPT era. So, but at the same time, some of the components are quite closed. What you are going to do about it? There are no replacements. So you need to develop those core components yourself on the side. So there's a lot of potential, but just to raise that, you always need to balance kind of the risks itself as well. And security and privacy, this is something that is sometimes overlooked, but that needs more stronger attention. We unfortunately have seen that some of the, especially from kind of academia, community side, they are not always to the level in terms of security that from the government perspective we would expect. So we need to have some level of due diligence when you are doing that. And this really kind of builds into the quality and reliability of solutions itself. With this being said, I'm a true advocate for open source. So government approach is built on being open, but there are different risks that you need to kind of consider while going down the journey. So this is my brief view. There are many more things to discuss about, but thank you, everyone. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ott, for your views and the lessons learned from the bureaucrat development, which I understand is quite complex with a network of interoperable AIs, with some private and some public source codes. It's good to hear from your experience what are the compelling requirements for gearing there. I would like to now give the floor to Jovan Karpulica from the Diplo Foundation to tell us actually from his senior experience in teaching and raising awareness on AI developments in public services and to diplomats in general. What are the key challenges still ahead and to be tackled so to ensure these responsible and explainable AI developments towards trustworthy digital public services? Jovan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It's a really great pleasure to be today at your timely and I would say important panel. And you raised the critical question, the question of a public awareness about AI. And AI is probably one of the phenomenon where people speak a lot about when there is a lot of confusion and that there is, I would say, little understanding. And I will share a few images which I'm allowed, which can explain how we try to address this issue back in spring this year when we realized that diplomats here in Geneva were coming to Diplo Foundation and Geneva Internet Platform with a question, very simple question, is sometimes even theatrically, is the AI going to eat us for breakfast? I'm trivializing it. But there was if you can recall, there was a huge avalanche of information of the end of humanity. And that basically calmed down towards the autumn. And we had autumn of more clarity in discussion. But that was the context when we realized that we have to do something. And then when we tried to explain AI to diplomatic and policy community, you suddenly realize that you have a famous tale of a blind man and woman and the elephant. They saw different things. Some saw privacy, automation, job losses, algorithm, databases, driverless cars. And then in the brainstorming at Diplo, we said, okay, what we can use as the simplest way to start explanation from, let's say, understanding for a 5-year-old person to the top decision maker. We wanted to look under the bonnet, and this was the first approach to see what are algorithms about. Neural networks, machine learning, deep learning, and other acronyms. And it was another problem which we noticed, that the discussion was easily polluted by new acronyms, new terms, and you were basically raising in the pecking order of expertise related to using the acronyms. Therefore, we started with the flags. In Geneva, you basically, if you walk around, I would say in many cities, you see the flags, national flags. And this is entrance to the UN in Geneva with 193 flags. And then we organize the flags according to some patterns, mainly color patterns. Then you have Scandinavian flags, you have Latin American, you have Slavic, Pan-Arabic, Pan-African. That was the first step to explain to diplomats the first step to understand what AI is. It is identifying patterns, in this case in 193 flags, patterns of color, shape, symbols, but it could be in the 1 trillion lines of the text of ChatGPT on OpenAI, but the principle is the same. Then, after we help them to understand that in a very simple way, we move to the probability, which is the second pillar of the current way of AI, not the previous one, rule-based AIs, but current probabilistic AI. Therefore, those were two explanations, patterns and probability. Then we gradually moved into vectors, into neural networks and other issues, but still using the flags. Given the huge success of this simple explanation, we are now developing the board game, which will be presented in mid-February, where you can play with the flags, identify, win the game, and bring it closer, tangibly closer to the all citizens, I would say, not only diplomats in Geneva. We choose the flags because this is the first thing which they see when they go to the UN. My suggestion is that in any profession, one should find those immediate observable elements where one can explain patterns and probability, key pillars of artificial intelligence. The success was huge, and then based on that, we explain what does it mean data. Color in the flag is data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, and trying to see where exactly you can place artificial intelligence in this pyramid of the knowledge. Very often, we discuss question of protection of data in the context of AI. And this is important, but the key discussion is on the protection of knowledge. And this is the reason why, for example, WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva, is getting more and more in AI debates, because it is a protection of copyright and other intellectual property rights. And here is also the question of which New York Times recently kicked off with the court case against OpenAI, asking a very simple question. Do you use our intellectual property for developing your models? And then there was a debate with fair use and other things, but this is ultimate question. And debate about AI and policy discussion should focus more on information and knowledge than on data. It doesn't mean that data is existing mechanism, especially with GDPR, that it shouldn't be used, but we should bring more clarity with focus on knowledge. Now, this is about the way how we have been explaining AI to policymakers, with, I would say, quite solid success because of simplicity of this explanation around the flags and coming to this pyramid. Now, one issue in the work of Diplo Foundation is that we walk the talk. Whenever we discuss policy issues on digital, AI, cybersecurity, or any other governance, we experiment with technology. We have to touch technology. Therefore, we have been developing AI system for the last almost 2 decades, first rule-based and recently probabilistic, especially after the ChatGPT. And I'm sorry, I caught some strange virus, but I hope I will manage to finish my presentation. What we notice in development is this system recently is that you have basically 2 coordinates. You have the question around data. you have a quantity of data where OpenAI and this big foundational model are focusing, and quality of data. Diplo, being a very small organization, cannot afford hardware or access to the quantity of data. Therefore, our focus was on quality of data, of annotating materials, texts, and giving this higher value. And we think that the major issue, especially for OpenAI developments, which we are also supporting and using OpenAI, open source, I would say, AI tools, is that we focus on quality of data. This is exactly where we can develop bottom-up AI, which is another concept, AI which is anchored into the knowledge of the organizations by annotating, by giving the weights to specific parts of the information and data. And in the follow-up or in discussion, I can explain how we are doing it at Diplo. And now I will conclude with, David, your question on what do we do with governance? Once we explain what AI, demystify basically AI, then we can discuss where we should govern AI on the level of hardware, computational power, NVIDIA and the other issues, data, source for AI, algorithms, AI capabilities, and uses. Those are basically the layers for the informed debates about AI governance. And in this context, we came to the famous issue of the risk. For a long time last year, the absolute focus was on extinction risk or long-term risks. Fortunately, there was a major shift, and we moved from extinction risk to existing risks that we face today. And the latest good news is that at the World Economic Forum in Davos, even big proponents of extinction risks like Sam Altman were not anymore upbeat as they were in the first half of 2023 of exclusive focus on extinction risk. Therefore, there is some sort of recalibration, and it is also good news for open source AI. It's also good news for reasonable and responsible discussion on impact of AI on our society, framed around long-term risks, extinction risk that should be discussed, of course, mid-term risk, knowledge monopolies of big platform, and short-term risk, job security and misinformation. Therefore, that's, David, all from my side, from explaining to diplomats and policymakers to practical use of AI in our work by bottom-up and open source AI, to the question of AI governance built around, these three types of risks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jovan. Please remain online. I just have one question. I guess then we can go for a round of interactions on the various aspects that were tackled in the various points that you all made. So Jovan, from your explanations, and I really am thankful for having showed us with this very simple example how you can raise awareness and demystify AI to diplomats and other politicians. From your example, what we understand is that AI is moving so fast that today the risk is immediate. We've heard from the other panelists that there is a need for responsible developments, for transparency, that regulations have to move forward quickly, and that at the country levels, there is a need in doing so to embrace open source technologies and therefore to embrace complexity in a potentially resource limited context. So one has to work on sustainability, on capacity building. But overall, my question to you, Jovan, is isn't AI posing the problem of digital sovereignty if we are not, all of us, becoming aware of what is happening and making what we have to do at the national level and international level to coordinate, but especially at the national level, isn't it becoming a real problem of digital sovereignty overall that could lead us to the technological singularity, as you were kind of mentioning in filigrane from Stephen Hawking?
Sure. Let me see. Yeah, David, this is a huge problem, but I wouldn't reduce it to the national sovereignty. I would bring it to the even individual citizens' organization sovereignty. Let me start from my organization, or we can say start with the ITU, our great host today. You are an organization that produces knowledge historically, more than 150 years of the long tradition. And today, the knowledge which is produced, generated by the ITU, should be somehow assigned to ITU, obviously shared with member states, obviously shared with the wider community. Throwing our knowledge and data just into the big data sources of a few tech giants, it's very dangerous. And it can lead to something which we can call knowledge slavery. Therefore, sovereignty, issues of sovereignty on individual citizen level, on the level of organizations, companies, business companies, countries, why not, is essential for the future of humanity. Therefore, it's not just a nice topic for discussion on international relations, but the critical for survival of democracy, economy, and vibrant society, and ultimately matter of fairness. Knowledge that you and all of us generate today during this debate should be somehow assigned to us, not by Zoom, who may basically process our talks and create some sort of knowledge patterns, regardless what they tell us that they're not doing it. We know how it works. And that's a problematic. And it's a possible, and the first step in ensuring sovereignty of knowledge is to have traceability. And that's possible to trace any AI-generated conclusion to the particular source. We are told that it's not impossible due to neural networks and other issues. This is nonsense. It's possible. And then we are trying to prove that it can be done. That's another issue if companies do not want it for intellectual property and other rights. Therefore, in brief, yes, sovereignty, but I would say citizen, individual, companies, organization sovereignty, and national sovereignty as well.
Thank you very much, Jovan. That's really enlightening. Indeed. So you mentioned traceability, which is technically speaking, indeed, something that is achievable to date. But if we go a little step further, beyond traceability, I think that what could be interesting is explainability. That is to say, understanding why we are given some outcomes by an AI, as the AI, be it a neural network, machine learning, whichever, is a black box. It's being trained with some data and then gives outcomes. We don't know basically how the neural network's been shaping up and why we would get these and that answers. There are efforts to, in some chatbots, in some more specifically generative AI developments, to provide references to data sources from which the answers are coming or were processed. But could our panelists take on this question? So whether how to gear toward explainability? I mean, there are research efforts in developing methodologies. But how difficult is that to get there, to get to something explainable from a black box AI algorithm? Maybe Ott or Daniel, if you can, from your respective experiences in your chatbot developments. Ott, Daniel.
Thanks, David. To be very honest, on a technical level, I don't really have an answer because I'm not a technical person. So maybe Ott, if you've got something on the technical side, I'll hand to you first.
David, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, my question is Jovan mentioned the compelling need for traceability in training AI models and therefore to make it possible to understand why such models may be giving some answers from their given training data sets. So my question is, how difficult is that to date to come up with some tools, methodologies, good practices to gear toward explainability of black box AI algorithms?
Mm-hmm. So this is a really tough from a technical side as well. So from one end, you want to have this kind of a nice conversational aspect of a chatbot. So everyone has used the ChatGPT. However, at the same time, from a government perspective, you need to balance that with the answers being actually valid, answers being, there's a responsibility behind it. Every answer has a responsibility. So from that perspective, we have actually much relied today still on rule-based, not the rule-based, but more of a typical, not black box approaches. So this is how we have so far worked. Of course, we've been testing out various kind of generative AI solutions as well, but we have not yet implemented those into Bureaucrat. But this will definitely follow at one point. But right now, we haven't taken any practical steps, just small pilots whereby there is no kind of an overarching backlash if something goes wrong.
Thank you, Hot, for giving some elements of answers. All right. Another aspect that Jovan, you emphasized on is related to the risks and risks-based approaches to regulating, or at least to understanding impacts of the usage of AIs. Alejandra, from your ongoing works with your ANIA Alliance and other international studies like your readiness feasibility study together with UNESCO, is this the way to go? Is it risks-based approach what you presently are working on, and could you elaborate on this?
Yes. So what we are working now in the working groups with more than 200 experts and different sectors is in understanding the situation in Mexico. And I want to emphasize this because there's not enough information about the Global South. And listening to John and now, I was thinking about what Singapore is doing with creating and developing its own LLM and with Asian data. And this, I think it's data sovereignty. And probably in Mexico and in the Global South, in Latin America, mainly thinking this like block as Latin America, the working groups talked a lot about we need information, Mexican information. We need to work with data, Mexican data, because now governments and small and medium businesses are working with LLMs of other countries with data that's not representing really the uniqueness of Mexico. So one of the ways to work and one of the lines of action, actually, yes, it's evaluating risks, like how AI should be regulated in terms of high risk. For example, we have had conversations about democracy, the risk for democracy in terms of we are undergoing the biggest election in some months. In 2 months, we are beginning our biggest election process, and deep fakes are beginning to be the main thing in campaigns already. So this should be considered a high risk, or this should be prohibited. So these are the kind of conversations that we are having now in the Alliance in terms of what to regulate, in terms of use. And the other very important thing is that Countries like Mexico, countries in Latin America, countries in the global south need to develop their own technology with their data. So I loved the term of data sovereignty, so that we can create our own, protect our own democracy, and really tackle one of the biggest challenges in now, that it's that Mexicans, Latin Americans, and generally the global south is not represented in this large language model. So yes, we are evaluating risks. There's one bill in already presented in the Senate regarding the different risks, artificial intelligence risks in different sectors. But the other one is how do we really transform Mexico to be a developer, to be a country that really can participate in a different way as a developer with their data, and really collaborates in the creation of AI with different kind of data. We just to show the complexity of Mexico, we have more than 68 different indigenous languages, and for example, those are not represented. We are a diverse country, and we are not represented in most of the platforms, in most of the APIs that are now out there in the market. So it's a complex thing to say if we are going to approach only a risk vision. I think we are, but also how do we innovate? How do we transform the Mexico to be a really innovative with our uniqueness, and to tackle the challenges that we are having nowadays with what's in the market.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you for addressing the question and giving a stance at what's happening with your alliance and how you are taking aboard the risks in understanding the AI usages. I know that Jovan and Daniel wanted to quickly intervene. Maybe Daniel, if you want to very briefly react to Alejandra's talk, because then we'll jump to the questions from the audience.
Yeah, of course. Now, just one quick point, because the whole conversation around data sovereignty is also something that came up last year. We organized with the Canadian IDRC a conference in Rwanda on open and responsible AI in Africa, and one point that came up time and again was the issue of data sovereignty. And Jovan, you mentioned knowledge slavery. Another term with regards to data is data colonialism. That came up, and that comes up also quite strongly when you talk about open source AI, to say, yes, we want to make data, for example, language technology, language data accessible for organizations, for companies in Kenya, in South Africa, in Ghana, in Rwanda to utilize. But how do we do that in a way, how can they do that in a way that this data can, that companies there, that organizations there also have the skills to utilize it, and that it's not just companies elsewhere in the global north who have the ability to use it and then benefit from the data. So that comes then to the point of licensing, which is one other very interesting conversation going on at the moment. What are appropriate licenses for the responsible, I would also say equitable use of data, of training data, especially when it comes from the global south, for example, underrepresented languages. And secondly, I wanted to just briefly add one conversation that I found quite interesting that I had with an organization in South Africa called Lelapa AI. They are also very much at the forefront of doing AI language technology for Southern African languages with a focus on South Africa. They are also looking at small language models for the exact reason to say, look, if we have large language models, they will always give out garbage one way or another. The only way that they do not do that is if they do this very intensive, labor-intensive work of checking the data set with workers, such as underpaid workers in Kenya. And if we do small language models, they can perform very well. They can have highly contextual, highly curated, high-quality data sets, and then attached with appropriate licenses. And yeah, just wanted to bring that aspect.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And data colonialism, it's another key term that I took note of. Yes, indeed, if AI will speak for us in the future, it's got to hear and learn from all our voices, I guess. Now it's come the time to address the questions from our audience. Julian was kind enough to extract a few of these, so I will go through them and just let me know who wants to intervene. So the first question we got is from Michael Strange. So how much does a responsible regulatory model depend on ensuring that state agencies have the capacity to build and own AI algorithms, or is it sufficient to rely on procurement from the private sector? I think, well, who wants to answer that question? The floor is open. All right, Hot, please proceed.
Yeah, so I think the question itself is posed in a kind of a negative way that the government should itself develop. I'm really pro for collaboration with private sector. So we are not doing development our own. We are body leasing developers from private sector. So similarly, you would then question whether those developers that are ingrained as part of our team are suitable or not suitable. It's about having the practices in place. It is about having kind of a basic cybersecurity that you are regularly carrying out. You have the knowledge itself for the developers, for the business side. Everyone knows what are their responsibilities. So early on, I oftentimes saw that the business side really didn't understand that their involvement in the project is critical. And this is not something specific for AI. It's specific for all IT projects. Business thinks that they are somewhere and waiting for the end product without any commitment itself. Unfortunately, not the same. So private sector, of course, we can trust, we should trust, but also ensure that they are following what we are requiring. We have our both government cross-functional requirements, we have our non-functional requirements. So you need to have established how that collaboration is taking place, and you need to make architectural decisions your own. So everything related to architecture, we are in charge. However, we are collaborating actively with private sector.
Thank you for your feedback. We have another question from Jacob Willem Brun. Interesting presentations and discussions. Thank you, Jacob. Any thoughts on how democracy can adapt in the long term to AI instead of citizens producing most economic value? Any candidates to answer that question? No candidates? Jovan, no inspiring pictures or key terms or...
Well, the democracy on any inclusive economy, market economy, and other actors can basically develop and flourish by ensuring that AI is not monopolized, because market economy and democracy do not function very well in a highly monopolistic systems, whether we speak about any power. In this case, it is a knowledge power which is the most powerful. Therefore, the question for open source, bottom-up AI is not just a technical question which can be dealt with some committees at the UN and presented as a resolution. It is the critical issue for the survival of inclusive, balanced societies worldwide, and that's so important. And it has to be, the first step should be with issues like traceability of the AI, which was mentioned. And here, one point which I want to raise, and with that I will answer, is we are usually presented with binary options. It's not possible to have traceability of AI because it's difficult to know what neural networks are doing. That's true. But it's not impossible to get what comes into neural networks and what is the output, or what are the weights which artificial intelligence is using. Exactly. And this is a critical issue, I would say, for democracy, for inclusion, for societies which use oral cultures. Like I was recently in Kenya, there is a lot of knowledge and wisdom in Ubuntu philosophy. How to integrate that into future AI system without being just captured by those who have technical means? Therefore, the short answer is this is a critical issue, I would say, for future of our society, developing open source, bottom-up AI.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Jovan. With this, I will conclude the session with just a few words and information about future events of interest and an initiative that are connected to this webinar. So if you allow me just 5 minutes to conclude. So thank you very much to our esteemed and distinguished panelists. It was very interesting to hear your different views from your respective backgrounds. We've heard about responsible developments. We've heard about the need for transparency, explainability of our AIs, regulations, inclusive design to avoid gearing toward negative effects potentially of these AI developments. The AI technological scene is moving extremely fast, so indeed it's got to be taken seriously aboard, and both internationally but also at the national level, and all nations have to build capacity and come up with better understanding and becoming aware of what AI is about. We talked about generative AI, which is to date one of the most impressive and important development in the AI scene. So just to conclude, what we've been discussing thus far will be the subject of a case study publication. So I do invite again our panelists to contribute. We will be glad to publish the outcomes of this discussion into a short case study paper, which will be, I guess, published over the coming couple of months. This webinar is the first in a series that we will be organizing from ITU and together with partners. And this is part of a larger collaboration, which is yet to be announced in a couple of weeks from now, which is called OSEE. OSEE is a new project. It's called Open Source Ecosystem Enablement. It is a co-funded project by the European Commission, which witnesses the collaboration between ITU and UNDP, which looks to support countries in getting trained, educated, and receiving full support to embrace open source technologies. Open source AI being one possible technological area where they will get support. And therefore, as part of this project, we will organize a series of webinars, workshops to discuss the compelling issues of embracing open source technologies for digital public services. So I will just conclude with this. Stay tuned. There will be an important event in Brussels early on February, on the 2nd of February, which is called the Open Source Policy Summit, organized by Open Forum Europe. This event will witness the official launch of the OSEE project. So if you are around, please contact me, and I will be happy to have and organize side meetings to discuss potential collaborations, but also future events that we will organize. And last but not least, we will have, as was presented at the very beginning of this webinar, the Global AI Summit that will take place on the 30th and 31st of May 2024 in Geneva. And during that summit, we will organize a follow-up event to this webinar, which will take the form of a larger workshop with actual governments to discuss open source AI for public services. And we'll take this opportunity to demonstrate a reference implementation of an open source generative AI for public administration. So you are all welcome and invited to attend. Just let me know, and there will be more information on the internet in the coming couple of weeks. So I thank you very much once again, our esteemed panelists. It was really insightful and refreshing to hear about your ongoing developments and your views on the actual problems posed by AIs and open source technologies at large. So thank you very much. I thank also AI for Good for having hosted this webinar and for the organization, logistically speaking, of everything, as it went pretty smoothly. And I do thank very warmly our attendants, our audience, because you've been so many to register and to today attend this discussion. So thank you very much. And with this, I would like to close this session and speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learned something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the eShop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for Good.
The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia, and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much.